The U.S. military is facing an aging infrastructure crisis. It's literally falling apart, and it's holding back America's ability to fight. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Now, America excels when it comes to top-of-the-line military systems, like its Ford-class aircraft carrier, nuclear submarines, fifth-generation fighter jets, drones, and paint buckets swinging on a rope, designed by military contractor Kevin McAllister. Top of the line in warding off invasions, especially around the holiday season. You would think that if America could make all these advanced systems, then it must have the infrastructure to build, house, and repair them. But you would be wrong. U.S. military bases are literally falling apart due to old age and poor maintenance. Just like Mickey Rourke. Which is bad. You can't have military readiness if your hangars, barracks, and depots aren't working smoothly, or don't have the resources necessary to fix the latest weapons systems. As competing powers like China build up their own military infrastructure, the U.S. needs to make sure that its military bases are ready for possible conflicts. The U.S. spends hundreds of billions of dollars a year on defense spending. So why are U.S. military bases falling apart? This would be like spending $2 million on a home and it turns out to be a dilapidated shack. That makes no sense. Unless, of course, you live in California. In that case, it's a steal. One of the primary reasons for this is that money for facilities is a favored bill payer when budgets are squeezed. In other words, when the military runs out of money, they decide that they can just put off repairing infrastructure until next year. Military leaders admit that this risks shortchanging infrastructure for other priorities. This has eroded U.S. power projection and, left unchecked, will ultimately disrupt combat readiness and lethality. It's kind of like how some people spend tens of thousands of dollars on guns to protect their homes when their homes look like this. Maybe fix it up so it's worth defending. Some facilities have been neglected to the point that they aren't even worth saving. And the more the U.S. military delays, the more this raises the cost of the needed maintenance. According to a report published by the Government Accountability Office, earlier this year, the cost of deferred maintenance for the U.S. military branches and defense agencies is $130 billion in 2020 dollars. That's more than 1,000% of the combined funding requests for facility sustainment in the 2020 military budget. Let me emphasize that this is in 2020 dollars. Thanks to inflation and supply chain issues, that might as well be pesos. So how bad is it across the U.S. military? I'll tell you after the break. Welcome back. U.S. military infrastructure is aging across the board. Let's start by looking at the Army. The Army has more than 500,000 buildings and other structures on its bases. A recent report by the Congressional Budget Office analyzed roughly 49,000 of them. It does not have good news. It's kind of like going to the dentist for the first time in 11 years. You knew things were bad, you just didn't know how bad. Although the Army's estimate of the building's intended useful life was about 36 years, their average age was 47 years in 2020. In other words, by now, the average age of these buildings is 50 years old. And since this is the average, there are much older buildings that the Army is still using. Thousands by now are 80 years or older. Some places, like Fort Bragg, have outdated barracks with asbestos and mold, forcing hundreds of soldiers to move out. Those who aren't so lucky, like the troops in Fort Stewart, have to live with the mold. Soldiers stuck in mold-ridden barracks are asked to be part of Operation Eradicate Mold, an initiative that tasks soldiers with cleaning mold on a near-daily basis. Talk about forever wars. Forget trying to recruit gamers. The military should start recruiting janitors. The cost for renovating and modernizing Army facilities won't be cheap. According to the Congressional Budget Office estimates, the cost of completing all deferred maintenance and keeping buildings up to Department of Defense standards could come at $19 billion in 2020 dollars. The cost of renovating and modernizing them would be $34 billion, bringing the total to $53 billion, or $61 billion in today's dollars. If you think the Army's bad, then wait till you hear about the U.S. Navy. Navy infrastructure is old, really old. The smell of rotting fish and salt water is probably an improvement. More than a third of the Navy's aviation depot square footage was built during the 1940s, but it gets older than that. The Navy's 4 public shipyards range in age from 114 to 255 years old. Those shipyards were built for wind and steam-powered ships, not nuclear-powered aircraft and submarines. That'd be like your parents getting you a PS5 for Christmas, and instead of a TV to play it on, they give you a phonograph. Only one of the shipyards is big enough to hold the new Ford-class aircraft carrier. Equipment in those shipyards are getting old too. At 2 of the 4 shipyards, 64% of all capital equipment exceeded their service lives. Officials note that having older facilities can pose huge problems. It can be difficult for a depot to maintain complex modern weapon systems, such as the FA-18 Super Hornet, with facilities that were designed for less complex systems. This is not good. According to a 2020 report by the National Commission on Military Aviation Safety, one naval air station in Virginia had steel letters falling off the walls. Broken doors forced sailors to use aircraft tugs to pull the massive doors open and closed, one time accidentally hitting an FA-18 Super Hornet and causing substantial damage. The fire suppression system was inoperable, and only 2 of 8 bays had working power for aircraft maintenance. The Commission found similarly unsatisfactory conditions at numerous installations across the services. Maintenance staff had to spend hours just moving aircraft from one bay to the next. They're living in filth and just working around everything that's broken? Are they training people to be soldiers or me in my 20s? Well, I kind of miss my first New York City 1-bedroom apartment and all 6 of my roommates. Thanks to lackluster infrastructure, dozens of ships need to be retired over the next few years because the Army isn't able to maintain them well, which will cost even more money since they'll have to give all those retired ships gold watches as going-away presents. Do you have any idea how much a 90-foot Rolex costs? Despite being younger than the Army and Navy, the Air Force is also running on old equipment and bad infrastructure. The Air Force has 40% of its major equipment beyond their reliable lifespan of about 18 years. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz chairs the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee for the House Appropriations Committee. She says she personally witnessed atrocious conditions, citing airplane hangars being held together with duct tape and coat hangers, doors that are about to fall off. Glad to know that even the Air Force relies on duct tape. Like the Army, the Air Force also has its share of mold. According to officials at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in 2016, the missile alert facility structures there are often infested with rodents, rattlesnakes, and mold due to gaps between the foundation and wall structures. Oh, who doesn't have a rattlesnake or two in their missile alert facilities, am I right? Well, Holloman Air Force Base has mold, bats, and a whole lot more. It was a dumpster fire. And what's wrong with that? I mean, the Bat Cave has bats in it, and if it's good enough for Batman, it should be good enough for the Air Force. The school had to have an ultrasonic chirping emitter installed to drive out bats and birds. But other problems still linger, such as a sinkhole that threatens the building's stability. On top of that, Holloman's chief of media relations said a typical class of 20 students cannot all plug in their computers at the same time due to a lack of network port and electrical outlet availability. This is a school that trains Air Force pilots to operate remote drones. This is like Taco Bell's culinary school running out of cheese, which would be preposterous since the entire course at Taco Bell's culinary school is just throw cheese on it. The largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, Al Udeid Air Base, also has issues. In 2016, mold caked the walls, showers, and air conditioning filters. Bugs nested in food, and urine and feces flowed out of broken bathroom facilities. That's disgusting. But on the bright side, it probably helped soldiers from San Francisco feel less homesick. But it made other soldiers sick. A spokeswoman for the Air Force admitted that some personnel experienced gastrointestinal distress, but only for a very small percentage of the base population. Definitely gross. Especially if you, let's say, suddenly get a huge influx of Afghan evacuees. Some good news is that there's at least some efforts to make renovations at some of these locations, especially for living facilities. But in order to make sure that the military can maintain its edge, the U.S. needs major reforms, especially for building up future generation weapons systems. The facilities need to be in tip-top shape if they're expected to house advanced defense systems. From Kevin McAllister. This was his reaction to seeing the state of things as they are now. So what do you think about the U.S. military's aging bases? Leave your comments below. And if you like this show, remember that we rely mainly on direct support from viewers like you. All it takes is as little as $1 per episode over on our crowdfunding website, Patreon. Visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered for more. Click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.